A reading from Paul's letter to the early church community in Rome. You can read along in your bulletin. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in affliction. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Pursue hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be arrogant, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all.
Thank you so much, Tom. Good morning. My name's Tony Coleman, and I serve as pastor here at First Congo, and I want to welcome you again to this place. This morning is the final Sunday in the season of Easter. These 7 Sundays in which we are called to reflect on and to look for the power of new life. And so this morning, I want to invite you to consider the ways in which new life is connected to how we frame problems and how we engage in an ancient spiritual practice. Have you heard of the Serenity Prayer? Yeah. There's the version that goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there's the lesser known version that goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to keep my mouth shut even when I know I'm right. If you spent any time in a 12-step program, then you're almost certainly acquainted with at least one of these 2 versions of this prayer. In fact, this prayer is sometimes known as the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer. Bill W., one of the co-founders of AA, described the prayer this way when he came across it. Never had we seen so much AA in so few words. The prayer manages to capture the need for acceptance, the need to make change, and the need to discern, all in a single sentence. It has been a balm for those in 12-step programs and others, anyone really, who finds themselves in a time in which they must realize both their powerlessness on the one hand and their agency on the other. It's a reminder we can all use from time to time, isn't it? All too often, we convince ourselves that one or the other is exclusively true. Sometimes we see ourselves as exclusively powerless, a victim of our own lives, tossed about like a sailboat in a tsunami, as circumstances pummel us with one uncontrollable challenge after the other. A boss that hates us, a house that's falling apart, a body that won't get well, a mind that's fading, a partner that annoys us, an addiction we can't control, a city that's unsafe, a country that's out of control. As we go down the list, we start to build a whole narrative that it's us against the world, and the world seems to be winning. And so all we can do, we think, is accept our lot and move on. Alternatively, at other times, we might go in the other direction. And we think of ourselves as in control, the captains of our own destiny, able to best whatever circumstances might drift our way. We can resolve any conflict, we can remedy any illness, we can even roll back the effects of aging with the right diet, the right creams, and the right surgeries. If somebody says or does something we don't like, we can fix them. When our government does something wrong, we can speak out and protest and work hard and make change. The world is a collection of challenges and problems which we must try and very possibly can solve. we think. Of course, though, both realities are true at one time or another. Our lives are beautiful, burdensome, complex combinations of problems we must try to solve and problems we must learn to hold. The trouble comes, though, when we confuse one with the other. The trouble comes when we decide that solving a problem might mean destroying its cause. The trouble can come when we think that accepting circumstances means settling for abuse. The trouble can come when we're so caught up in the pain in our own lives that we rush into a path to fix it. That's why the Serenity Prayer calls for wisdom. That's why we are called to discern. And this is one of the purposes of blessing. The scripture passage that Tom read to us this morning comes from the Apostle Paul's letter to the Christians living in ancient Rome. These were Jews, Romans, and Greeks, men and women, citizens and non-citizens, all worshiping together, trying their level best to live out the teachings of the one called Jesus. By the time Paul wrote this letter, the persecution of Jesus' followers was already beginning to take hold. You see, these early Christians lived in stark contrast with most Romans because, unlike most Romans, they refused to worship the emperor. According to their beliefs, there was only one supreme leader of the universe, and he didn't sit on a throne in first century Italy. According to the first Christians, God was the source of their lives and the highest reality in existence, not Caesar. Even so, these early Christians, despite their high calling and spiritual charge, even so, these early Christians still sometimes got tangled up in the weeds, so to speak. Because they were a culturally diverse bunch of people, problems began arising. Problems around cultural practices like circumcision and eating meat and which days were considered sacred. And then still, on top of all those problems of cultural difference, there were still those other political problems that lingered in the background and sometimes in the foreground. There was the problem of how to resist evil without resorting to evil. There was the problem of how enduring oppression very often inspires the desire for vengeance. There was the problem of what to do with suffering, tribulation, and the seemingly endless trials of everyday life. And Paul says to these people living through all of that, Paul says, let love be genuine. Be patient in suffering. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. If it is possible, insofar as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. What Paul offers is a schema, a method, a means for discerning how to live in a world full of problems. Those we must try to solve and those we must learn how to hold. He talks of love and weeping. He talks of patience and peace. And he talks of things that sounded strange then and certainly might sound strange now. He says, do not curse those who persecute you, but what? Bless them. At first glance, words such as these might sound like resignation. They might sound like surrender or some kind of toxic positivity. However, what Paul was actually describing was how we can take the problem of oppression and political persecution, how we can take the problem of people who offend or harm us, and we can address that problem not by accepting our fate, nor by destroying our enemies. We can do what Jesus taught, Paul is telling us. We can acknowledge our enemies as enemies as adversaries, as aggressors or persecutors, and then we can choose to love them. In blessing our persecutors, we address the true problem at the heart of that kind of harm. We address the spiritual problem, the problem of dehumanization. That's what's at the heart of persecution, isn't it? Whether it was the Christians in ancient Rome or the non-citizens in modern-day America, whether it's LGBTQ folk or women or people of color throughout this country's history, whether it's those of us who get bullied on the playground or those of us who get kicked to the curb in this city, when it comes to the problem of persecution, what we're really encountering is the problem of some group of people thinking that they are more human, more worthy, more deserving than we are. And that is a terrifying problem to face. That problem cuts to our core in a way that few other problems do. Because when we face that problem, when we face someone or some leader or some government that says that we aren't worthy, that we aren't human, that we aren't deserving of the basic norms that everyone should be able to enjoy, that does something to us. Even the simple accusation, the words or the laws or the policies offend us at such a deep level that we find ourselves activated at the level of our animal selves. We fight, we flee, we freeze, or we fawn. In other words, we hit back, we run away, we put our heads down, or sometimes we might even agree. We might even internalize the message that we're not human enough and decide that maybe we deserve the treatment we're getting. Struck to the core of all that we are, confronting the problem of our humanness, we find ourselves stuck in a confusion of rage and terror and a desire to fight and a desire to give up and a desire to belong, even if it means giving up our dignity. But with blessing, when we choose to bless someone or something, an internal transformation takes place. A spiritual conversion gets underway. You see, friends, when you bless someone or something, you reach into your core and you announce, if only to yourself, that you have the power, you have the energy, you have the deeply human substance necessary to bring goodness into our world, all on your own. And then, when you bless someone who persecutes you, you are converting their efforts to dehumanize you, to label you as expendable, as unworthy, as less than. You are taking their energy of evil and you are converting it into the very substance of goodness. Not the feeling, not the thought, but the substance of goodness. Because in blessing your persecutors, you are taking back their effort to dehumanize you, and you are transforming that effort into a source of deeply human goodness. This is what Paul is inviting persecuted, problem-filled people into. Paul is saying to us that in greeting an angry world with love, in meeting our persecutors with blessing, we are rebuking the power of death, and we are meeting it with new life. Far from being disempowered sailboats sucked into a tsunami, instead of being captains of the world who pretend we are in control of everything around us, Paul is inviting us to hold a problem and to change it with one single act: blessing. As you take a look at your own life right now, friends, how might you be feeling persecuted? Whether it's by this regime, or it's by this country, whether it's by a boss who won't seem to let up, or it's by a family member who criticizes you to no end, whether it's a bully or a set of circumstances, where in your life might you be feeling persecuted, made to feel little or less than? Where are you facing that kind of problem? And I wonder, how might you bring blessing into it? How might you seize your own power and energy? How might you reclaim your basic humanness? How might you push goodness into the world and even into the direction of the very person or people who are making you feel small? You see, in the act of blessing, we give ourselves over to a moment of clarity. No longer looking up at our lives from a position of assumed weakness, and no longer looking down on our lives from a position of moral superiority. In blessing, we find clarity, the ability to accept our circumstances right alongside the ability to assert our divine human power to meet the world with love. And from that place, we can more ably discern what to do next. Speak up for what's right with calm and with care. Let go of that toxic presence with decision and with care. Surrender to that illness or that grief or that circumstance with courage and with care. Rejoice for ourselves and with others. Weep for ourselves and with others. Find the peace within our own power and then live it with care. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. Give us the courage to change the things we can, and lend us the wisdom to know the difference. And God, when wisdom fails us, when clarity evades us, when we feel attacked or offended or just plain off because of someone or something, help us to turn to blessing, oh God. Help us remember that no matter what, we belong to you. We human beings made in your image with the infinite power to bring goodness into this beautiful, broken world. May it be so, and amen. We now worship God as we present our offerings.